Hi everyone, my name is Cheng from the University of Waterloo, and today I'll be presenting our work titled Augmenting Digital Media Consumption via Critical Reflection to Increase Compassion and Promote Prosocial Attitudes and Behaviors. Essentially, what we aim to do is to augment the digital media consumption process, for example, watching a YouTube video, with a critical reflection process with the hopes of increasing people's compassion, prosocial attitudes, and behaviors. What we contribute through this work is evidence that augmenting our digital media consumption process with reflection can better inspire prosocial attitudes and behaviors, which itself is an important component of compassion. We also contribute important findings on benefits of reflection processes with different focuses, namely emotion and surprise. Let's start by talking about the motivation. Let's first talk about why did we focus on reflecting on digital media. Digital media is a big part of our lives. We focus on YouTube in this work, which has 1.7 billion unique monthly users. Moreover, even though much media has been created on global issues, they seldom translate into prosocial behavioral changes. Despite that, there have been very little existing works exploring reflections on digital media as a way of encouraging prosociality. In this work, we chose to focus on climate change as the global issue, and a YouTube documentary as an example piece of digital media. More on that later. Next, why did we choose critical reflection as a way of encouraging compassion and prosocial behaviors? Well, that's because critical reflection involves adopting wider perspectives and changes in one's beliefs. Moreover, existing frameworks provide a good reference to create good quality prompts for reflection. Moving on, let's talk about our intended outcome, which is to encourage compassion. Importantly, based on Strauss et al.'s definition, prosocial behaviors and attitudes are the final component of compassion itself. But why did we focus on compassion instead of empathy, which has been studied much more in SIGCHI? Well, it's because compassion, at least according to the definition we use, has additional components over empathy, including regulating negative emotions from affective empathy, and actual attitudinal and behavioral changes. Moreover, compassion is broader than empathy, in that compassion can be felt for both close ones and strangers. It can also be felt towards larger and more abstract targets, like humanity. Another interesting thing about compassion is that it involves both affective and cognitive dimensions. Let's use the first component of compassion, recognizing suffering, as an example. In this case, the affective dimension is in experiencing an unconscious affective reaction to someone else's suffering, while the cognitive dimension is being able to reason about their experiences. Given this, we devised two reflection processes, one that focuses on emotions and another that focuses on information that is incongruent with prior understandings, in other words, surprises. As such, our experiment involves asking participants specific reflection prompts before and after watching a YouTube video with the aim of motivating compassion, prosocial behavior, and attitudes. Particularly, we have two experimental conditions, one involving emotion-focused prompts and one involving surprise-focused prompts. Next, let's move on to the research questions. The first research question focuses on the effects of reflective prompts on the outcome variables. The question here is, does augmenting the process of watching a video with reflection prompts have any effects? After understanding the effects of prompts in general, the second RQ investigates differences between the two types of prompts, emotion-focused versus surprise-focused. Let's talk about how we explored these RQs. We have three conditions in total, the control condition and the two reflection conditions, one that focuses on emotion, RE, and another that focuses on surprises, RS. The study was carried out in 2 sessions, with the second session being carried out 2 weeks after the first session. The main session for the control condition involved a pre-study questionnaire, watching a climate change YouTube video, a few interview questions, and lastly, a post-study questionnaire. For the RE and RS conditions, additional reflection questions were asked before and after watching the video, and participants were also asked to tag the video while watching it. Let's first talk about the pre- and post-study questionnaires. These questionnaires measured participants' compassion and attitudes towards climate change. The post-study questionnaire also measured participants' level of reflection. Next, let's talk about the video. Participants were asked to watch a 17-minute YouTube documentary created by the 60-minute Australia program on the Solomon Islands' rising sea levels. The video was chosen to reflect a typical type of publicly accessible climate change video with an urgent tone for action. Its length was long enough for a meaningful presentation of both emotion and information on the topic, but not too long as to cause participant fatigue. For the RE and RS participants, beyond just watching the video, participants were also asked to tag moments in the video. Particularly, the tagging was done using a Chrome extension called time tags demonstrated in this recording. RE participants were asked to tag moments that were emotional, while RS participants were asked to tag moments that were surprising. These tags were then used for reflection later on. So next, let's talk about the reflection questions. Before watching the video, RE and RS participants were asked reflection prompts on their views and attitudes of climate change. After the video, they were asked to reflect on 2 tags from the video that were either the most emotional for RE or the most surprising for RS. Finally, RE and RS participants were also asked to reflect on changes in their attitudes and future behaviors. Next, let's talk about the post-video interview that all participants went through. Specifically, they were asked 2 questions about what the take-home message is for them and their view of responsibilities towards climate change. Now we'll talk about the follow-up session that happened 2 weeks after the main session. It starts off with an interview, then a questionnaire, and lastly, a recall test. The follow-up interview mainly asked participants to report behavioral changes in the past 2 weeks. All verbal responses throughout the entire study were qualitatively coded and then quantitatively analyzed. The questionnaire measured changes in state compassion, reflection, and attitude towards climate change, while the recall test had 6 multiple choice questions related to content presented in the video. Next, let's move on to the findings. Let's first talk about RQ1, which is about the effects that the reflection questions had. In this analysis, RE and RS participants were grouped together and were compared to control participants. Overall, in the main session, the reflection questions led to significantly higher motivation to learn. An example is participant 16 from the RS condition, who expressed their intent to learn more about rising sea levels after the main session. RE and RS participants also performed deeper reflection. Here's an example of a RS participant learning new connections between existing knowledge on rising sea levels and new knowledge on its impacts on animals that lay eggs on beaches. Next, in the follow-up session, participants in the reflection conditions who performed deeper reflection in the main session 2 weeks ago also performed significantly deeper reflection in this follow-up session. As seen here, those who performed critical reflection in the main session had a much higher chance of also performing critical reflection in the follow-up session 2 weeks later. Moreover, RE and RS participants who performed deeper reflection in the first session also adopted more prosocial behavioral changes after 2 weeks. These are some qualitative evidence of reported prosocial behavioral changes by RE and RS participants, which include using more environmentally friendly modes of transportation, consumer behaviors, and other behaviors like finding a job about planting trees. Moving on to RQ2, which investigates the differences between the emotion-focused reflection process, RE, and the surprise-focused reflection process, RS. We found no differences in the main session, but in the follow-up session, the surprise-focused reflection actually led to higher recall. This is very interesting because one might expect emotion-focused reflection to potentially be more effective at encouraging compassion and prosocial changes. Instead, what we found was additional benefits of surprise-focused reflection above and beyond those of the emotion-focused reflection. So, what can we really take away from this study? The first set of implications are about designing reflection processes for nurturing compassion. We found reflection questions to be effective at encouraging several aspects of compassion, including prosocial behaviors. However, having reflection questions that explicitly target all 5 compassion components could be even more beneficial. Moreover, even though critical reflection led to adopting wider perspectives, future work can explore technologies that better facilitate the process of going beyond expanding perspectives into nurturing a sense of common humanity. Next is about longer-term critical reflection processes. What we observed is that maximizing engagement in the first reflection session is important to encourage continued engagement in longer-term multi-session critical reflection. Moreover, the use of priming questions was hugely beneficial in our study as it allowed participants to reflect on experiences that they often expanded on in later reflections. In terms of the focus of reflection processes, since we found benefits of surprise-focused reflection above and beyond emotion-focused reflection, future research should also explore how technology can better support longer-term critical reflection processes that have different focuses. In conclusion, critical reflection can be effective at nurturing compassion, prosocial attitudes, and behaviors within the digital media context. Moreover, surprise-focused reflection processes could be more beneficial than expected, when compared at least to emotion-focused reflection processes. In terms of generalizability, even though we focused on climate change as an issue and only used a single video in this study, we believe that our findings can probably be largely generalizable to other issues and pieces of digital media, since the reflection questions are designed in a way that is grounded on existing critical reflection research, and because the video used was chosen to carefully balance between the saliency of climate change as an issue and how it affects faraway strangers. Lastly, I would like to acknowledge the contribution of my amazing colleagues, as well as the NSERC Discovery Grant for funding this research. Thank you very much for your attention.